Good morning, everyone, and welcome to WheatStalk 2020. I would like to acknowledge Alberta Wheat Commission and the Peace Country Beef and Forage group for seeding and maintaining these demonstration plots. Now, I want to encourage people to ask questions throughout the day, and if there's specific topics we don't cover, I'd love you to ask me about those. Now, keeping within the theme of WheatStalk, there is a CCR song written by John Fogerty that was actually performed at WheatStalk, being Bad Moon Rising. And I think some of the lyrics really resonate well with the topic of fungicide applications. Now, as best I don't sing to you, but there's a couple of lyrics that I want to read to you that I think fit well with this. I see a bad moon rising. I see trouble on the way. I hope you've got your things together. It looks like we're in for nasty weather. Oh, don't go round tonight. It's bound to take your life. There's a bad moon on the rise. So today's demonstration is based on a research project that I led in 2018 and 2019, and it was called Revisiting the Value of Early Fungicide Applications. We had field sites in Edmonton, Barrhead, Red Deer, and Lethbridge under irrigation. Now, unfortunately, we didn't have any sites in the Peace, so I'm really glad that we can have this demonstration here for growers in this part of the province. Now, I'm going to start by sharing a little bit of background information about why we conducted this research, and we're going to look at some of the key treatments in this research, and I've got tables here that you guys can follow along with. Now, the last official thing that I want to do before we get down to the learning is acknowledge the financial support that allowed us to conduct this research. From the Alberta Wheat Commission, the Saskatchewan Wheat Development Commission, Alberta Innovates, and Syngenta, with in-kind support from Alberta Agriculture, the University of Alberta, CCAN, Bayer Crop Science, and Syngenta. Now, I am an agronomist, and certainly applying fungicides is part of that agronomy package, but we did have pathologists involved in this project, so we do have that strong scientific background in pathology involved. And I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Sheri Strydhorst from the University of Alberta, Alan Terry from Syngenta, Dr. Michael Harding from Alberta Agriculture in Brooks, and Doon Pauly, my collaborator in Lethbridge, and Dr. Ji Fing with the Plant Diagnostic Lab. And we had a fantastic master's student working on this project, being Minor Asif. So why are we revisiting this topic now? To manage leaf disease, some growers sometimes apply a sublethal rate of fungicide tank mixed with herbicide at an early growth stage. Now, this is kind of that half rate of tilt applied at your herbicide timing. And at $3 an acre, it's an easy peace of mind that makes growers feel like they're managing their cereals at an advanced level. It's convenient, it's low cost, but previous studies have found it doesn't produce a significant yield or economic benefit. And I'm not trying to cast judgment on anyone here. I know this practice is happening, and I can see why you can do it, but we're going to talk about if you need to do it and if it is actually benefiting you. So despite previous research not finding it something that benefits the growers, it can accelerate fungicide resistance and make current fungicide tools ineffective. Now, a key component of this research is actually talking about the development of fungicide resistance, and that's what we want to talk to growers about today. Now, Alberta farmers, you're all aware of herbicide resistance, but fungicide resistance is sadly something that needs to be put on your radar. There are global examples of fungicide resistance to major Western Canadian cereal pathogens. The first example is Fusarium graminearum. It is resistant to tebuconazole, or maybe I shouldn't say it's resistant, but this resistance was created in the lab. So if it can happen in the lab, it can eventually happen in the field. The next is stripe rust, and I've got an image here of stripe rust. That's the disease with that orange kind of puffy pustules along there. Now, stripe rust isolates have been found to be less sensitive to group 3 fungicides in the UK. And then we've got leaf spot, so our septoria and our tan spot. These have shown to have group 11 resistance in many parts of Europe. And there are tan spots, so this top disease again, that has displayed resistance to both group 3 and group 11 fungicides. Now, in Alberta, we generally have 2 main modes of fungicide action for our cereal crops. That's the group 3s and the group 11s. And when we see instances globally of fungicide resistance to these pathogens that are here in Alberta, to the tools we use, there is certainly cause for concern. So we want to talk about that. Now, earlier I mentioned that there are examples of fungicide being applied at an herbicide timing that don't show a yield or economic benefit. So some of this work was done by Kelly Turkington in 2004, and then again more recently in 2015, working on barley, where they applied tilt or propiconazole on barley and found it had little impact on yield. And then there was work in Saskatchewan in the early 90s on the cultivars Katapawa and Fielder, so certainly older cultivars, where they made fungicide applications at herbicide timing, at early stem elongation or that PGR timing, flag leaf timing, and the head timing. And they found that they really only had responsive yield when they applied the fungicide at flag leaf timing and head timing. And that's where we want to revisit this topic with more modern cultivars and make sure that these findings from those earlier studies and on different species are still holding true for growers today. So in the research, we had the varieties AAC Viewfield and AAC Brandon, and both cultivars are rated as intermediate for leaf disease. And that may sound rather good, but under intense disease pressure, we have reported dramatic yield increases with fungicide applications on both cultivars. Now, I do have a little bit of Brandon wheat here, and you can see this wheat was actually not sprayed with a fungicide, and you can see there is intense leaf disease on this flag leaf, being the tan spot and septoria leaf complex. So this is present, and this, although an intermediate variety, is showing a lot of disease. Now, what we saw actually in some field trials that we did around Edmonton back in 2017, and 2017 was an absolutely fabulous year for creating great yields, but also great disease. When we applied a head timing fungicide application on Brandon, we saw a 13% yield increase. And then with Viewfield, another intermediate variety for intermediate rating for resistance to leaf spots, we had 21% yield response with that head timing fungicide application. So I think growers need to remember, although they are moving to a cultivar with an I rating, they still, when conditions are right environmentally for disease, still respond to a fungicide. So fungicides definitely do have an important fit for these varieties. Now, I did mention that those conditions in 2017 were perfect for disease development, and a lot of it is the amount of rainfall we get. The better the conditions are for growing your crop, the better they are for disease development. So just to touch upon the local conditions here, we've got the weather station here at the Fairview Airport, and the rainfall up till the end of July was 7.5 inches, or 114% of the long-term average, so a little bit wetter year than typical. In May, there was 1.4 inches, and in June there was 2.6 inches. So the total rain in May and June here at this field was 4 inches. So we're kind of getting into that fairly ideal conditions for disease development. Maybe a little on the dry side, but certainly something worth thinking about a fungicide for. Now, July was actually wetter than the long-term average. The rainfall in the month was just about 3.5 inches of rain, so an extra inch of rain compared to typical. Sorry, did you want to pause there?
No, that's great, yeah.
Okay, I just saw you looking around and wanted to make sure.
No problem, I'm just getting the lay of the land here, make sure no one's creeping up on us.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so back to it. So in Alberta, as I kind of referenced, the most relevant foliar diseases are the Septoria, Stagnospora leaf blotch complex, and tan spot. And we've got the images of those. They are present on the plants that we've pulled here. And some people get really wrapped up in which one is which do I have on my plant. You actually probably need a lab analysis to differentiate which one is which. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because the fungicides that we're using actually control both. So it's not anything we need to get too wrapped up about. So let's start talking about the results that we saw. Now, specifically in terms of disease control, and I want to zone in on this table here. So what we've got in this column is the timing of the fungicide application. So first we have an untreated control, then we sprayed a fungicide at that herbicide timing, that starting at that 2 to 3 leaf stage up to 2 tillers, and then we have a fungicide application at PGR timing, so that's kind of that manipulator timing, growth stage 30 to 32 when you start to get stem elongation, and then the very historical timing of fungicide application at flag leaf, and then the fungicide application at head timing. Now, head timing, what we're actually zoning in on is 10 to 30% anthesis, and what that means here is we've got this image, And the head, it actually starts flowering, or the yellow anthers come out right in the middle of the head. So when you have just some anthers visible in the middle of the head, that's that ideal timing for that fusarium head blight timing, or that fungicide application at head timing is what we're referring to. So in this column here, we look at the disease control when we spray the fungicide at those different growth stages throughout the growing season. And when we measure the amount of disease at the end of July, early August, right when your fungicide has kind of outlived its usefulness, and it's critical time for filling that head and critical time for photosynthesis, we see that if you only sprayed a fungicide at that herbicide timing, you have an 8% reduction in leaf disease. And that is really minor, and it's actually not statistically significant. If that fungicide application was delayed till PGR timing, we had a 25% reduction in leaf disease. So that was really good compared to the control. So we see some value in terms of how pretty your crop looks. But we got the biggest reduction, or a 39% reduction in leaf disease, when we sprayed that fungicide at flag leaf timing. And that's, I think, why everyone has had it ingrained in their mind is spray fungicide at flag leaf, protect the flag. And then if we delayed that fungicide application to head timing, when we're possibly also getting some fusarium head blight protection, we get a 34% reduction in leaf disease. So these delayed fungicide applications are really the critical time for making your crop look the prettiest. But how does that translate into a yield response? Because that's really what pays the bills at the end of the day. Do you want pretty, or do you want money in the bank or grain in the tank? So when we look at the yield compared to our untreated control, if we sprayed fungicide only at herbicide timing, we got a 1% yield boost. It was not statistically significant. So we're really not seeing that economic benefit from spraying it at the herbicide timing. If we delayed that till our PGR timing, we had a 2% reduction in yield, and there's maybe some trampling with extra fungicide passes. But remember, we had 25% of the leaf disease control, but we didn't get a yield response associated with that. So we need to really disassociate how pretty our crop looks and make sure we focus on the yield response. And then when we have a fungicide application at flag leaf timing, that's when we start getting a 10% yield boost. And delaying that till head timing, we got an 11% yield boost. So the two lines that I have in green there is really where you want to target your fungicide applications, is to those later times. The other thing I should specify is that when we did this research, we did it in 8 site years, in 2018, 2019, over 4 environments. So that's where we get the 8 site years. But only in half of those environments did we get a fungicide response. So you guys, you always get the question, when should I spray fungicide? Does it make sense this year? Does it make sense the following year? And when we look at kind of the environmental conditions where we didn't get a response and where we did, they're quite different. So where we got no fungicide response, we had lower relative humidity, and this included Lethbridge, where we had irrigation. And I think many people think, oh, irrigation, I must get a fungicide response. But because the relative humidity is so low there, we didn't get a fungicide response. On average, the rainfall in May and June, we talked about here in 2020 in Fairview, it was 4 inches of rain. At those sites where we had no response, it averaged just under 3 inches of rain. So when you have drought, you don't have disease, nor do you need a fungicide application. It is what we're kind of seeing. And then the growing season precipitation was just under 7 inches of rain. At the sites where we did see a fungicide response, they were characterized by higher relative humidity. We had on average over 4 inches of rain, so 4.4 inches of rain, and 10.7 inches of rain on the entire growing season. So when you are thinking about spraying a fungicide, think about if you have a crop that has great yield potential, if those weather conditions are great, and if you are really creating conditions for ideal yield, they can create conditions for ideal disease development, and that's where the fungicide is important. Now, 2018 was actually a fairly dry year, and not in all parts of the province, of course, but widespread it was, and there was still a lot of fungicide application. And I think we need to maybe put some confidence in ourselves that if we have dry drought conditions, we shouldn't be spraying a fungicide. So I want to share some words of wisdom from Dr. Mike Harding about fungicide applications under dry conditions. And what he says is that every unnecessary fungicide application is selecting for fungicide resistance. The diseases, you might not see them, but those fungi are hanging out low in the canopy at the soil level on residues. And when you spray your fungicide and they get a non-lethal exposure, those pathogens hiding low in the canopy survive, and we start going down that path to developing fungicide resistance when we don't get a yield or an economic benefit. So it's really questionable from a sustainability and a resistance management perspective. So we need to empower ourselves that at times you don't need to spray a fungicide every year, and it is trying to make those decisions when it's a smart decision and when it's not a smart decision. Now in the figure here, we see that fungicide application at head timing was the highest yield. There's also some other benefits with fungicide application at head timing, and that we might get potential control of Fusarium head blight. And I don't think it's a huge pressure in this area, but it's certainly something you need to have on your radar. There is a tool to help you decide how much risk there is with Fusarium head blight. And I looked up the Fairview weather station. So this is a tool that you find on the Alberta Climate Information Services website, and it was developed in connection with the Alberta government and the Alberta Wheat Commission. And when wheat was flowering in this area between July 12th and July 21st, the risk was moderate in this area. So I've got a little image here, and you might not be able to see it, but we are low and the pressure wasn't extreme. But if you think you can possibly get some Fusarium head blight control and you get the highest yields from that timing, there's a lot of good sense in delaying your fungicide application to that head timing. Now the final thing we're going to talk about is actually the economics of these different fungicide applications, because everyone tells me I might as well put that half rate of tilt on at herbicide timing because it's only costing me $3 an acre. So yes, we might break even and it might not cost us a lot, but if we don't actually get much of an added yield, if any, and it's leading to fungicide resistance, we really need to reconsider the value of doing that practice. So what I have here is the fungicide timing and the treatment. So these are the products we used in the research. We used there's a half rate of tilt because that's a common practice, a full rate of tilt at herbicide timing. We did that in the research plots. A full rate of Trivapro at PGR timing. Now, yes, that is a more expensive fungicide, but we were using it because it does have a group 3, a group 7, and a group 11 fungicide in it. And then we have a full rate of Trivapro at flagleaf timing, or a full rate of Procero XTR at head timing. And this is the cost of just buying that fungicide. So a full rate of tilt would be just over $6 an acre. The full rate of Trivapro, of course, the cost doesn't change if you put it on at PGR timing or flagleaf, is $33.28 an acre, and then the Procero is costing about $21.84 an acre. And then you have to include the cost of running your sprayer, of paying your driver and things like that to do that. And then we looked at what was the break-even yield to cover that based on wheat prices in 2018 and 2019 from PDQ, which is the Alberta Wheat Commission's price forecasting tool, and the price per bushel there ranged from $6.26 per bushel to $7.07. I know we all wish we got those prices for our wheat, but that's for number one, but we had to set something. So to make a half rate of tilt pay, you need an extra 1.4 to 1.6 bushels per acre. It might achieve that, but it might not. So, and you are leading down that path of fungicide resistance. So really not a good practice. If you used a full rate of tilt, you need about an extra 2 bushels per acre to cover that. In our research, we saw 3 extra bushels, but it wasn't statistically significant, meaning some years you might achieve that, some years you might not. So if anything, it's right near that break-even point. So not worthwhile for that practice, given the risk that comes with it with developing fungicide resistance. Then with our Trivapro at PGR timing, we needed just about 6 bushels per acre on average to cover that. We got -2 bushels per acre, so definitely a no-go there. Where we make economic sense is in those growing seasons where we had that on average, and of course everything's on average, but an average of 4.4 inches of rain in May and June. You need just about 6 bushels an acre to cover that cost. We got 11 bushels per acre of extra yield. So there you've got about 5 5 bushels of profit, if you can think of it that way. So certainly a wise decision. And then with our Procero at head timing, you need, because it is a cheaper product, about 4.4 bushels per acre to cover that. We got an extra 11 bushels, so you are definitely making profit with that, given the right environmental conditions. So you can see clearly that the flagleaf fungicide application, or the head timing of fungicide application, is where it's going to make the most sense for you if you've got the right environmental conditions. So I'll just give you a couple of quick take-home messages to sum up. Early fungicide applications at herbicide timing, we saw only an 8% reduction in leaf disease and only a 1% increase in yield. So really not a wise decision there, because the payoffs are so small. When we look at the disease control at PGR timing, yes, we got a 25% reduction in leaf disease, so your plants looked prettier, but we didn't have a yield increase with that practice. So I don't think anyone's out there just to make their crops look pretty. We want to make money at this. Then the fungicide application at flagleaf timing, we had a 39% reduction in leaf disease, which is great, but even better than that is the 10% increase in yield and the profitability, because we had about an extra 5 bushels of profit at the end of the day, that we covered the cost of that and we had the extra grain. And then finally, I think my personal preference is that fungicide application at head timing, where we got a 34% reduction in disease, an 11% increase in yield, and we got a 6.4 to 6.8 bushels of profit at the end of the day. So that was really the smart choice. It's not going to work every year. You got to really consider the environment, but make some smart decisions about fungicide application timing, and you'll do well.